And joining me in the studio now to discuss the arraignment of Nganjuwa is Inibehe Effiong. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Nganjuwa's charges have been dropped. What are your reactions to this?
My reaction is simple and straightforward. Let me start by saying that I have read completely the entirety of the judgment of the Court of Appeal Lagos, delivered by Honorable Justice Obaseki Adejomo on behalf of the court. I received the judgment this afternoon. I took time to peruse it.
Okay.
So let it not be said that a lawyer is commenting on the judgment he hasn't read.
Without being
I have read the judgment.
Okay.
Having read the judgment, I am now more convinced that the judgment, with profound respect to the court, has no basis in law. And I will give my reasons. In the first place, the National Judicial Council, in the exercise of its power under paragraph 21, part 1 of the third schedule to the Constitution, exercises disciplinary control over judicial officers. The power to exercise that disciplinary control is not exclusive to the NJC. In other words, NJC itself does not have the ultimate say in the fate of any judge in Nigeria. Because when the NJC recommends, which is all they can do, it behoves on the executive, specifically the president and the governors, to determine whether a particular judge should be removed or not. The court is now saying no, that you cannot investigate, you cannot prosecute any judicial officer while still in office, except the NJC has removed that officer or has suspended him. In other words, the intervention of the NJC has been held to be a condition precedent. I found that very strange because you cannot have a condition precedent that is not prescribed by law. We need to note that the immunity clause under the Constitution, specifically Section 300, it is exhaustive. The Constitution is clear on persons who are granted constitutional immunity. No matter the language we use, no matter the adjective we use to describe the judgment, what the Court of Appeal has effectively done is to give immunity to judges. There is no other way to look at it. Because the NJC is not a court of law. NJC is not one of the courts under Section 6 of the Constitution. It does not exercise judicial powers. And when the NJC sits to exercise disciplinary control over a judge, it is only an exercise of administrative or quasi-judicial power, which in itself cannot supersede or take precedence over the powers of the court.
You know what baffles me is the initial issue with this case was that the Ikeja High Court, they said it wasn't, Ikeja High Court didn't have the jurisdiction to try him. Now, how did it get to being discharged and struck out completely?
Well, you are aware the Honorable Judge had filed a preliminary objection, an objection challenging the competence of the charge, on the basis that being a serving judge, EFCC couldn't have investigated, let alone prosecute him, without the intervention of the NJC. It was on that basis that they hung the argument challenging the jurisdiction of the court. But as I have said, that the Constitution is clear on persons who are granted immunity. Judges are not one of them. My understanding of judicial immunity has always been a judge cannot be prosecuted in respect of decisions and judgment made by him in court. What, to my knowledge, the learned judge was charged has nothing to do with any judgment or order he had given. He was charged for corrupt enrichment. He was charged for corruption.
Exactly.
These are charges that do not fall on the decisions he had given. Nobody is charging the judge for giving any judgment one way or the other. So for the Court of Appeal to now say that the FCC has to wait before a judge can be investigated or prosecuted, I find that very strange. You need to also note that the question, I read the judgment. The court said, well, if the NJC at the end of its decision does nothing, you can exercise the right to judicial review. You can apply to judicial review. What would that result to? What does judicial review mean?
Can it be appealed? Can this judgment be appealed?
Why not? To the Supreme Court. But the point we are even making is that this is a judgment that may cause anarchy in the system. Because the NJC is not the only body under the Constitution that is given this power.
Indeed.
We have the Police Service Commission under paragraph 30 of the Constitution of the third schedule. You have the Federal Civil Service Commission under paragraph 11 of the Constitution. In fact, in the case of the Police Service Commission and the Federal Civil Service Commission, they have no power than the agency because they have powers of dismissal. NJC does not have power of dismissal. NJC only recommend. It will mean that no civil servant in Nigeria can be arrested, can be prosecuted, except the Federal Civil Service Commission has suspended that civil servant. And it will also mean that no police officer in Nigeria can be sanctioned except the Police Service Commission has acted.
What then do we say of the competence of the judge who actually struck out this case?
I cannot question the wisdom of the court. As a lawyer, I respect the wisdom of the court. I respect the judgment of the court. But I disagree with that judgment because I believe that judgment, with due respect, cannot be correct. If you even look at Section 292 of the Constitution on the procedure for removal of judicial officers, imagine, for example, if in the future you have the Chief Justice of Nigeria being alleged to be corrupt. The Chief Justice of Nigeria is the head of the agency. Under paragraph 20 of the text schedule to the Constitution, will a Chief Judge now sit to make a determination to suspend himself or now impanel a panel to suspend himself? So you see what this will result to.
And before the matter goes to the Supreme Court, which I suspect it would, can the National Judicial Council do anything?
No, there's nothing the National Judicial Council can do because this is the judgment of a court of law. There can be no extrajudicial intervention to overturn this judgment. We can only hope on the Supreme Court. Because if this judgment is not reversed, it will have serious ramifications on the polity. It will have serious ramifications on the judicial system. Even the President of Nigeria can be investigated. The Supreme Court has said so in the case of Ganifa Emi and IGP, Inspector General of Police, that the President can be investigated, governors can be investigated. How much more a judicial officer, which does not enjoy constitutional immunity? So we need to be very careful on what we are supporting. While we agree that it is important for the judiciary to be seen to be independent, we must clearly ensure that we do not set a precedent that will destroy our democracy. Judges are not above the law. Judges should not be seen not to be subject to the law.
And they have no immunity.
Exactly, because these agencies are specifically created by law to fight corruption. They're specifically created by law to fight corruption.
Inibehe Effiong, legal practitioner, thank you for joining me on TVC News Hour.
My pleasure.